All right. Happy Tuesday, everybody, and welcome to another Future Focused, where we are living at the intersection of business, technology, and the human experience. I am looking forward to today's conversation, as I often am looking forward to my conversations, but this one in particular will be a fun one. We're going to be talking about, there's all sorts of stuff out there about how things are changing and skills are changing and jobs are changing and all these things are changing. But what there isn't always enough of is, so what do we do about it? And how do we stay on top of it? And so we joked backstage a little bit about the fact that everything's a how-to. We're going to do a little bit of a how-to, but hopefully on a deeper, more nuanced level than just here's these 3 easy steps to navigate 2024 and beyond. So to navigate that conversation, I'm joined by Sid Mohasseb, who is what he's been tagged as the entrepreneur philosopher. And one of our stated goals was to actually define what that is. But he's also an author. He's an adjunct professor. So Sid, thanks so much for joining me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
A pleasure to be with you, Chris. A pleasure.
Yeah. Well, so let's dig into this first piece of a little bit of your background and kind of the space that you've been playing in to have led to being the entrepreneur philosopher.
So I'm clearly an immigrant from the age of 16. I came to the U.S. By myself and went to school. And
so you immigrated by yourself? Just
yes.
like, was that a personal decision? You just up and did that?
Or it was a personal decision that my parents didn't necessarily agree with.
Okay.
And it actually has an interesting story to it. I'll kind of give you the short version.
Okay.
So I had I have hemophilia, which is a blood order disease. So I was at the hospital at the age of 15, and they didn't know what it was, and they were scared because of the hemophilia, which they couldn't figure out what it was, anyways. But it was pain, and I was at the hospital, and I was just reading newspapers and stuff, and I thought, hey, I should come to the States.
Like so many 15-year-olds do. They're just reading the newspaper and they're like, you know what? I should just pack up and move out of the country. I love it. Yeah, just common story. I hear it all the time.
I told my dad, he says, "You're crazy. What are you talking about? You've got this disease. You got this. You can, you're a good student. You're gonna go to college. What is this?" I said, "No, I want to go." So there was adamant, opposition from both my mom and dad, and being me, I went ahead and I got out of the hospital. I went and I got applications for a few schools, and I got I-20s, as they say. I got accepted. I sent them my stuff. My parents didn't know. Then I went to get a passport, and they said, "Hey, you need your dad's signature. You can't get a passport." So and I was like,
you're pretty far down that road by that point.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Hey, by the way, can you just sign this?
I'm trying to negotiate my way into this.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I went to my grand uncle, and I said, "Hey, I want to do this," and they won't let me do this. And he said, "Why do you want to go?" So I told him something that my father had told me when he was 7 years old and migrated from a small town and into the capital of Iran. And he had asked my grandfather, why are we moving to the capital? And my grandfather says, in small water, small fish will grow. In big water, big fish will grow.
Okay.
I want my children to be big fish. That was the comment. So I went to my grand uncle and says, "Why do you want to go?" I said, "In small waters." And he says, "Shut up. I got it." Everybody knew about this.
Like, you're not gonna. At 15, you think you're so wise. Like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna pull this one. Hey, you know what?
I got it. So, anyways, he negotiated the way, and I ended up here. But I came to school. I started my first business when I was in college. Then started a career in consulting. Started as an analyst. I became the youngest partner of this firm. I was blessed to have the folks that that took me in, and they taught me a lot of stuff. At the age 23, 24, I was sitting with the presidents of Union Bank and boards, and really, really blessed to have the exposure. Started my own firm doing some what's called turnaround, that's buying companies and reselling them. Did some investments in early stage companies, started 5 companies, mostly in software, some in technology and hardware, some in distribution and so forth. So uh, kind of
Now,
fast.
was that part of the plan at 15 when you
No,
were, persuading your grand
no,
uncle to sign off, talk to your parents into letting you come to America?
yeah, there was no
Yeah.
plan. I think it was bordering stupidity as opposed to genius. It sounds like genius because 2, 3 years after I left, there was a revolution in Iran and everything is a mess and all that. And well, it
Yeah,
seemed
I
like
just planned all that. That just
it
happened to work
seemed
out.
like
Yeah.
I had this vision. But no, it was just
Yeah.
it was just luck, I guess. I don't know. So so basically, I became, after having a few successes in building companies and selling them, I became an angel investor. I made investments in early stage company. I was the president of Tech Coast Angels, which is the largest angel investment entity in US.
Okay.
I started a fund, uh, venture fund, and then I sold one of my companies after the great recession thing in 2008, 2009, to KPMG, which is a large
Yep. One of the big
advisory.
four.
Yeah,
Yeah. Big four.
I sold it to them and helped them build some good stuff. And I left when I left them in 2017. I was the head of the strategic innovation
Okay.
for KPMG. And then since then, I'm doing 3 things essentially. I write books. I have a couple of books, as you mentioned. I'm an author. Uh, they're both bestsellers. One of them, which is I don't know if you see it behind me, it's "You Are Not Them," which is
Okay.
the last one, and that got to be bestsellers both in business and in philosophy.
Ah,
So
okay.
so that's part of why they call me the entrepreneur philosophy, because
I got it.
think
Yeah. You
about
kind of bringing those two, you're bringing those two together.
because I believe that it's everything in the mindset, and I redefine. I kind of redefine what entrepreneurship is. I
Okay.
think what got me here as an immigrant, and I think every immigrant is an entrepreneur, because we exchange what we have with something of higher value, and that's the
Yeah.
definition of entrepreneurship uh, that was stated in the 1700s by some French guy. It says entrepreneur means somebody who has something. It could be an idea, a product, something, and exchanges it for some higher value. Now, later on, that definition, about 50 years later, was changed with an element of risk. That an entrepreneur is somebody who has something, wants to exchange it for something of higher value, knowing that there is risk.
Okay.
Um, and I think it's a mindset more than what people drum up. Yes, is
So are you suggesting you don't have like your 5 steps to entrepreneurial success that we can just lay out and say this is if everybody does these 5 exact things,
so
then
the
you're
books
guaranteed
the book
success?
starts with saying, hey, if you're looking for how to put this book down, this ain't for you. I'm serious. The first page says that. It's this is not like a compound chicken that you add this and add that. And by the way, I have a friend who's an MIT graduate. This everything that you could, every test that you can possibly imagine, has got 800 out of 800. I mean, this guy is a genius. He loves cooking, and he follows every recipe to the T. And he is an awful cook.
Really?
It's not about
Does does
following.
does he know you think that?
Yeah,
Or
I
is
tell
he
him, and
finding
then
okay, okay, perfect. Hey, we talked backstage about, not disclosing
no,
things
he
on the
knows.
live stream because
He
I don't
knows it.
edit these after.
He
Okay,
knows
he
it.
knows. All right.
But the thing is that a chef, like an entrepreneur, is who you are. That's what makes it. It's what's in here. It's your, and that's why I say you have to build your own entrepreneurial philosophy. You have to be
Okay.
you. You can't be Elon Musk. You can't be Bill Gates. By the way, I think Mother Teresa was an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
She
I would
had
agree.
something and she exchanged it for something. She defined what that better is. Better is not
Yeah.
always money. Better
No,
is
and I
what you
think
define as
well, and I haven't published it yet, but I have a book drafted called Relentless Intention, and one of the core components of that is getting at what you just described, is actually getting to the core of like what's actually driving you underneath this. Because if you're trying to just copy somebody else, to your point, it won't work. Just like the recipe you said, you go, well, I followed the instructions, I did all the things on here, I used the exact amounts, and the food tastes terrible. So what happened? And it's one of those things where it's like, well, it's not authentic to who you are.
yeah. And this may sound a little, and this is where you get the philosophy part. This may feel a little touchy feely, but the
That's fine.
love you put in as a chef, the love that the people who cook, the love that they put in it, the energy that they put in it, the way that they mix it, that little bit of salt and a little bit of a pepper or something that they do makes that dish very different, very unique, and tasting fabulous.
Yeah.
When
No,
that in there, it doesn't work.
and it's funny because we were talking backstage about how difficult it is sometimes for people to wrestle with some of this stuff where you go, yeah, but like, what is the equation? Like, what is the variable? And you go, there's not you've got to figure that out for yourself type of a thing. And people are looking to the self-help book or this other person who's accomplished it, and they're trying to copy it instead of going, sometimes you got to actually take the time to do the hard work and figure out what that looks like for you. Because my observation and my experience has been anytime I've tried to copy someone else, or I've seen other people try and copy someone else, it's a fake veneer that just never
Yeah.
goes anywhere.
So you see, the thing is, Chris, if you say, well, how to approach this changes, all this stuff that your show is all about. The world is changing, and the human interest and the human psychology and what who we are. How do we fit in this? All the thing is, the first thing is the mind shift. That's
Okay.
what if I say you ask me how, I said start with the mind shift.
Okay.
And one of the things I did a TED talk a while ago, that's it's titled, um, uh, if I don't mess it up, it's titled, I believe, "Are you the artist, or the entrepreneur?"
Okay.
Okay, and I start the talk with this notion that imagine, of course, everything is wonderful. The birds are chirping. The weather is 72 degrees. Everything is beautiful. You're doing exactly what you want to do. You are a I don't know, world famous scientist, or you're the best dancer in the world, or
Whatever it is.
or I may be looking like George Clooney. I don't know. So something that is the best thing that you can possibly imagine. Now
Sure.
imagine that you have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and the family is wonderful and they're all blessed. But now imagine nothing changes. That 5-year-old will always remain a 5-year-old, will never go to college, will never go anywhere, never get married, you'll never have kids. You're doing exactly the same thing, same McDonald's at lunch, same thing at dinner, same. There is no change. It's
Yeah.
awful.
It's terrible.
So what I say is change is our best, it's the best friend you have because it gives you options.
Yeah.
Without change, you have no options. And
Which
options is what creates progress,
opportunity.
what
Yeah.
creates opportunity, what creates choice, what gives us the power as human beings to create our next best version. So we are the art and we are the artist.
It's a paradox in that sense.
It's a paradox in that sense, but and do we have flaws? Like every statue, there's a little bit of broken here, a little bit there. We do have flaws.
But what's funny about that, what's funny about the flaws piece, and I want to dig into this a little bit more, is I actually see, I can't remember what conversation I was having the other day about this, but I was talking about how in the rising AI world, sometimes those flaws are actually our greatest asset, because as things become more static and vanilla and the same, kind of like you described, when there's no, it's just, it's perfected. actually those flaws are what bring out some of the beauty in things, where you go, well, actually, what I really like is how not perfect that is. And in some ways, it's our greatest defense against a world of sameness, which I think in many ways, AI is fueling a lot of this. Just how do we become more bland?
So I disagree with you, Chris. The
Okay,
AI
good.
is not pushing us to be bland. We are already bland.
Fair point. Fair point.
Okay, we already the AI is saying, I'm going to take away what is bland and tell me what you can do otherwise. So a machine that's doing this and this, we go to work at this hour, we do this, we're an accountant, we balance this thing with this thing, everything, we do AR, account payable and account receivables, and we okay, if they take that routineness, that sameness, which we are comfortable with, we are addicted to, if they take
Yeah.
that away, which is a mundane thing that's taxing our brain, then we are left with this vacuum of what do we do. That's the scary part.
Well, and I think so. Actually, I think we're more aligned on here than, and this is why I love when I end up thinking we disagree, because it actually brings out richer discussion on this. Because I think it goes back to, it's an opportunity that we have a choice to make. And one of the things that I see happen a lot right now is AI is fueling this acceleration of the bland, where I see people looking at this going, instead of what you said, which is see the change as an opportunity to do something different, something wonderful, something you couldn't do before. Instead, you can say, I'm going to adopt AI to just do more of the same stuff that I'm doing. And now you're just doing the same stuff you're doing faster. And it's actually much more miserable, is the observation that I'm seeing.
And if that's your choice, it's okay.
Yeah.
If that is your choice, that's perfectly fine. But the grass is truly greener on the other side.
This is an instance where the grass is greener on the other side.
But if you like to have your blinders, and I mean, I get it. We're afraid. We're the sameness of what we're doing, what we've done for 20 years, 30 years, how we make money, I get it. I get it. But this is the argument that, hey, we should not have, I don't know, invented knife, because our teeth are not going to be as strong and as long. Well, we invented knife, and there was a physical evolution to us. And hey, now we can have things and we can eat it, and it's not.
We can eat tougher food. If we overcook our steak, we can actually eat it now. Before, we didn't have that option.
We would have been wrestling with cows on the street all the time, because it was we didn't have. So there is an evolution path, and at the beginning it always looks like
it feels terrible.
It feels terrible. It feels terrible because we look at it as terrible. This is my point.
Yes.
It feels terrible because we look at it as terrible, because we're used to this routineness. This is the comfort that we have, and we don't believe in ourselves. So one is, let's get to the how-tos. One is you have to do a mind shift and look at change as the only friend you have. I can tell you, you do not have any better friend than change. That always gives you an option. Always gives you a way out to somewhere better. Change makes you an entrepreneur to exchange what you have with something better. Okay. The second is, you have to believe. You have to believe that you are competent, you are capable, and we have to believe that the humanity is not going to bomb itself with this AI. We have to believe. There's a lot of hoopla, and we were talking about this the backstage as well. There's a lot of hoopla, negative, because people like to click on things that says the world is coming to an end. Okay, why? But can you imagine that all the newspapers or the TV would, CNN would show up and says there is nothing to report today. Everything is fine. So who's going to make money? Who would? There has to be some conflict.
Yeah, there has to. And I think, to your point, as we think about this, and I want to dig into how people can overcome some of this stuff, because it is. I recognize, having spent so much time in human psychology and behavior, this is a real challenge for people. And I'm very empathetic to the fact that I get it. And it is a very disruptive time, as you've said. I mean, things are changing. you don't really have an option to say, am I going to participate in the change or not? It's like, well, you're going to participate in the change, or you're going to be dragged into participating into the change. One way or the other, it's going to happen to you. The opportunity is, are you going to take the opportunity to influence it, or are you going to let it happen? But I am curious on this,
It's like
because
kids going to school, Chris. It's like kids
what's
going
that?
to school. It's like kids going to school.
Yeah, and I have a
You
lot
want
of
to go to
those.
school and have and enjoy and go in the yard and play, or you want me to beat you up and you're crying and you go there and you sit there and you're not enjoying it, but you're still at school.
Yeah, one way or the other. It's going to happen.
It's going to happen. I mean, the economic benefit. I mean, the last time I wrote this in my first book 6 years ago, that there's going to be $100 million economic impact. And some people said, oh, you're making it up. And I said, no, these are studies by Oxford. Now, the impact is $15 trillion a year.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's huge. It's far bigger than anybody ever anticipated.
It's 10 times the size of Russia. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Every year.
Every year.
It's
That's not
almost
like
equal
total.
to 1.5 billion people in China working for a year.
Yeah.
That's the economic impact. That's not going to go away. Nobody's going to fold the hand and say, lovey-dovey, let's not do this. Let's do the same thing the same way. It's not going to happen.
So from your end, though, and I am curious on this, because to your point, I agree the mindset shift is huge. It's huge because we're talking about the same environment. And it's like, well, you can either look at this in fear and you can run away from it, or dig in and say, I'm just going to stay right where I am. And again, kind of like the bully in the schoolyard, it's going to take your lunch money.
Yeah.
Or you can look at it and say, I have an opportunity. But I recognize for a lot of people right now, there is a whole lot hitting them. And so when you talk to people, or even with your students, as you're kind of helping them shape this mindset, what have you found that is effective in helping people get over that hump? Because it's one thing to say, I love change.
That's a good point. I'm going to tell you something I shared last night, because it was the last class that I had. I teach at the University of Southern California, USC. I teach both in engineering school and business school. And last night my class was in the engineering school, and it was the last class before their exam. So here's what I told them. I said, hey, you guys are technically competent, and these people are technically competent, but your technical competence is not enough. Anybody can get a chat GPT. The fact that you code better than somebody else is no longer that important, and it's going to be reduced. What matters is, do you have the ability to think critically, to attach the things together, to come up with, change your frame of reference and find that thing. And they have a project that I give them. And I said, all of you guys in teams, I gave you the same thing. I said, go find a problem, which is, by the way, another issue. We like people to give us a problem to solve, right?
Yeah.
But leaders are problem finders. They're not problem solvers.
I agree with that. They're not waiting for somebody to tell them what the problem is. They're
Correct.
the ones that are out going.
They're the ones that they go
problem.
find the right problem to solve.
Yes.
So I said, you have to be able to find the right problem to solve. And that's not how good you technically are.
Yes.
That's how you step back. That's how you look. That's how you apply critical. That's how you're objective and you get your biases out of things. That's how you have good judgment. That's how you use data. That's how you all of that makes you ready to be a leader in the next in the next few decades to come. Yeah. So the question is not, are you competent? So some people say, oh, I have to be technically competent. Should I become a programmer? No. You're using your phone, but you're not an expert in phone systems. This has significant technology in it.
Unless, going back to what you said earlier, if being a programmer is the salt and the love that you love to do, then great.
Go to it.
Good point. Go to it. Go kill it. But if it's something that you're just like, well, I feel like I'm supposed to do that because someone somewhere told me I need to be a coder, you're probably not going to.
Yeah. So here's the thing. In my other class, they had some paper to write about a case. Okay, I got this. And a lot of students, doesn't matter for foreign students or US students, unfortunately, they can't write word a dime. Our people cannot write. Our students cannot write. Okay. So I mean, so I get all these papers and they're perfectly written. No, I'm not stupid. This is Chat GPT writing this stuff. So I got it up and I said, guys, thank God for Chat GPT because now I can at least read this. But the problem is 17 of you have the same conclusion.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
So what I love about your approach on this, and I think, you know, and to some of the comments coming in, I think what you're hitting on is hitting actually on a really good point. First of all, one, I love that you're a higher ed professor that instead of raging out about ChatGPT usage, you're saying, great that ChatGPT is helping you articulate what you're trying to articulate in words, because before when you wrote things, I had no idea what you were saying. So fantastic that you're using that. The problem isn't that you're using ChatGPT to help you articulate things in words. The problem is you haven't taken the time to actually understand what your point of view and think critically about this and taken the passion and creativity that you have and put it into this. You've just copy and pasted it, which again is a mindset shift of, okay, well, you've used AI to make you more bland.
You know, it's if I use the I don't know, bicycle to go from my work to come back home, or to go from my home to the grocery store. Now I have a car. The means of transportation has changed, but my
Yes.
intention to go grocery shopping or to go to work, or I haven't changed. We think just because the means of transportation is faster. Well, we use calculators. Calculator is an AI machine in a way.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. When I was in school, they banned us from using calculators. We weren't supposed to use calculators. Guess what? We didn't turn dumber. We actually used it, and it's okay now, and it's not. I mean, it wasn't a big deal. The assumption that the limit of our ability is the limits that we have defined today is a false assumption, Chris.
I agree with you.
The
I agree with you
assumption that this
100%.
is the extent of our capabilities is a false assumption.
Well, and I think on that point, going back to, you know, kind of the point of our topic of like, how do you actually work through some of this stuff in terms of reinventing yourself? I've said on many occasions, one of the keys to this is not getting hung up on the how you do it today. Because if you're too hung up on the how you do it today, that's where this kind of change will feel overwhelming and completely disrupting, because you'll feel like you're losing something, when in fact it's like you're actually not losing anything. You're simply reinventing how you do what you actually really are passionate about doing.
So
You know, again,
yeah,
go for it.
one thing, Chris, that's kind of at the core of this, getting to an insight. Insight is when the solution to a problem becomes crystal clear. You say, "Aha! I got it. I got an insight, and I can see the solution to a problem." What I'm saying is, let's and some people, I sit on some boards and stuff, and people say, "Oh, you're creating a monster here." So what I'm saying to people is, okay, I'm going to change the way this is done. Think what you would have changed if you didn't have to do these things that are
Yes.
mundane, and the things that you've been complaining about for years, that this is time consuming, and it's okay. Here's an opportunity for you. What would you do to get the level up, to go to the next stage? What would you do? Let's think about that.
Yeah. Well, and the example I used, I did a thing on it the other day where we talked about this, because I recognize and am empathetic with where people feel, in that they see the work that is currently in front of them and what they do. And it can feel like a static box, where you're like, okay, this is the box I'm in right now. And so as things like AI and technology and automation start coming in, it can start to feel like that box is getting smaller and your opportunities are becoming more limited. But to your point, it's a false assumption, because the box is actually expanding and growing at all different points. And so to your point, the number of things that you hear people in the professional sphere go, I hate putting together PowerPoint presentations. And you're like, great. So have AI create your PowerPoint presentations. But it is almost this then analysis paralysis of, well, but what would I do if it's doing that? And it's
What
like,
would I do if I wasn't? See, this is the thing. What would I do
yeah,
if I wasn't putting the PowerPoint together? And
yeah,
and that's the creativity, the innovation, and that's in our ability as human beings. If we begin to think, we could do amazing things. Here's one thing you mentioned: the notion of a box. So I hate this thing. People say, let's think outside the box. What box? Who drew this
there is
box?
no box.
You have
It's the
created
box it's the box we've created for
we've
ourselves.
created,
That's
and
the
now we
problem.
say, let's think outside of the box.
Right.
I don't have that box. You have that box.
No.
I have my own box. Why do
Right.
you have a box? Why should we think outside of a box? That's a crazy notion. The whole thing is open. We can think everywhere because the thing is
Yeah.
that
And I
how
think it
to
goes back to something we were saying backstage where it can be very uncomfortable to feel like you're in this space where it's like, well, actually you can do anything. So what would you do and our natural response a lot of times is people going like, I don't know, tell me what to do.
tell me
Instead of
what.
going, or why don't you look at the opportunity and say, what would you do if you didn't have to do these other things? And I think that mindset shift is actually one of the most critical shifts you can make to reinvent yourself amongst all this change right now, because you actually have opportunity to do it. But it requires those critical thinking skills. Because I am watching some of the back and forth in the comments. And to your point earlier with some of the examples of people using ChatGPT for their papers, if you're not putting your creative essence and critical thinking into that work, it's not going to create a meaningful product, and it's not going to create a better outcome or opportunity for you. You still have to do that hard work. That doesn't go away because AI is helping. And I think that's one of the steps.
Chris,
It's a different work.
It's a different work. If you spend 80% of the time doing the mundane things and 20% thinking and creating and imagining, now that has shifted. Again, if you had a bicycle and you'll go someplace, you have lots of energy and it'll take you 20 minutes, 30 minutes to get to where you wanted to get. I give you a car, it takes you 3 minutes to get to where you want to get, and you don't have any, you haven't exerted the physical energy to get there. But the question is, what would you do when you get there?
And if you haven't answered that,
and you haven't answered that,
where
it doesn't matter the means of going how you get there.
And I think that's one of the struggles that we, just as a society and as individuals, struggle with sometimes. I think there's a couple factors you highlighted in that analogy that we'll get to some of this. Some of the stuff that folks are talking about in the comments is, your point. I see two things in that analogy that come to life when we think about human behavior. So first of all, one, the bike and the car analogy where, okay, hey, you have a car. Why don't you take a car? So often we haven't thought about, yeah, but what are you going to do when you get to the destination? And so then the idea of getting to the destination faster is actually very scary, because you're like, well, I haven't thought that far. Like, so I need the time to play. Like, this is really shaking up my plan. I was planning on biking for 2 hours and then I was going to think about it. You're telling me I'm going to be there in 10 minutes. Now I'm freaking out. And I think spending that time thinking through, what are you going to do when you get to your destination now, actually frees that up. But I think the other thing that I see a lot of just in human behavior is, and this is just something, if you have an answer for how to solve this one, I'm curious. But you have the folks who are riding the bikes who see the people getting in the cars going, zoom, and they're angry at these people in the cars getting to the destination faster, going, how dare you? I'm over here riding this bike, exerting all this energy, pedaling the bike, taking 2 hours to get there. And you're getting there in 10 minutes and you just sat on your butt and let autopilot take you there. And there's almost this, I want to pull that person out of the car because it makes me uncomfortable seeing that they're actually taking an easier path.
Well,
and I've always struggled to understand
let
that.
me get philosophical.
Yeah.
So if I believe that people have a choice, it's their choice to be angry.
Fair.
It's their choice. It's their choice. I can't beat people up into coming, to a different enlightenment. And yeah, and maybe the journey of biking is there enjoyable, and that's okay, and that's
Yeah.
perfectly fine. There's logic in that. That I like the
There
bike.
is.
The thing that becomes unfortunate is that they are unhappy
On the bike.
on the bike because you're
Yes.
passing by. If they were happy on the bike,
Yeah.
then it's perfectly fine.
Then
It's
ride the bike.
Then ride
Then
the
ride the
bike.
bike.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's like, and I think that hits on, as I look at some of these things and I look at automation and some of this, I know a lot of creators, and not in the creator space, but who, like, they still work with their hands. Like, I know someone who creates amazing wood artwork. And it's one of those things where he has no desire to get a CNC machine. He doesn't want to automate. And you know what? But to your point, he loves that work and he's fantastic at it. And he does the sprinkling the salt with love. And you're like, you know what? Go get it. And there will be a place for you in that because you're going for it. And that's fantastic. But he's not over there going, I hate all those people who are doing it this way and I'm miserable over here. And I
Yeah.
think to your point, there's room for the bike in the car.
So here's the thing. The thing is that it's not the biking that matters. This is if I wanted to use the same analogy. If you want to do what you're doing, if I'm I don't know, if I'm 30 years old, 40 years old, probably my job is not going to be gone by the time I retire. There's going to be
Yeah.
some version of it. It's not going to be
For sure.
okay. Not the whole world is not flying saucers over us in the next 50 years. It's just an illusion. Okay, the capability of AI is to the extent of a mice today. I mean, it's not even it doesn't have the intelligence of a mice today. Now, could it get to be of course. The point is, if you're afraid while you're riding the bike, then you're not even enjoying riding the bike. You're just
Exactly.
afraid.
Right.
This is the being upset part. If you're really upset or if you're really afraid, get off the damn bike. Don't if this is so
Yeah.
fearful, let's figure out a path forward. And if it's not fearful, then enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that combination of the two that creates the problem.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
and I think that's a really good point on that, in that there is room for all this. And I think at the same time, what I would add to that is there will be disrupt. I know we're really using this bike car analogy thing, but I think there's a point to it.
You think we're doing it a little, overdoing it a little bit?
No, I don't. Because I think there's a lot of like, hey, we said we're going to break it down and make it more practical.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things with it is, and this is one of the real challenge that I think professionals have right now, is with all of the change and all the innovation, you can't expect to just keep riding the bike and thinking that nothing else is going to change around you. And I think that's one of the challenges, is that people go, well, I want to keep riding the bike and I want the rest of the world to stay right where I am alongside that. And that isn't reasonable. And it might get harder to ride the bike. You might have to be that much better. And I was actually coaching somebody the other day where I said, listen, if you want to be in the space you're in and doing what you're doing and you want to do it your way, go do it. But you better be 10 times better than everybody else, because it's just going to be harder to differentiate yourself. And that's just the reality of things. And so
either be 10 times better, compromise your expectation of compensation.
Sure.
So this is the thing. The illusion is that if I'm having you have, I think, plenty of opportunities to go to baseball games and soccer games with your kids. If you go and you think, oh, my 7-year-old, isn't she cute? And we're doing this, and then we had ice cream. If you think that you can freeze time, and that 7-year-old would always be the same, and the whole thing would be the same, and it doesn't work that way. The kids grow,
No.
and if they don't grow up, that means it's a disaster. They're dead. We have to evolve, or we die.
Well, and I think accepting that reality that can be a really tough pill to swallow. And a good example of this that I have dealt with my whole life, because I grew up in a funeral home, is nobody likes to think about their mortality. It's like you're going to kick the bucket at some point, and you probably aren't going to know when it's going to happen. And you may not even get any lead time to it. It may just completely catch you off guard, type of a thing. And that's a really tough thing to accept. But the people I know who have accepted that tend to live life a little bit differently than the people who deny that, because it forces you, to your point, you can't just expect the world not to change and everything just revolves around you, because it doesn't. And once you accept that, then you can start to say, so then what choices am I going to make? And what opportunities am I going to lean into to actually make the most of this? So instead of saying, well, do I change or do I not change? It's, well, what are the implications of deciding to change or not change? And what sacrifices or trade-offs are you going to make? And actually going through that process may be one of the most helpful things people can do to actually navigate some of this stuff.
So this is people think that I take this to analogies and the way I think in terms of entrepreneurship to a limit, but I believe in this. We are all entrepreneurs because we are
Yeah.
all always looking to exchange what we have with something better. We are looking. Everybody, all those people who are afraid of AI, those people who are, we just said that are, addicted to the sameness and whatever, they just don't think. They just don't think that what they're going to get is of higher value that they have.
Yes.
Okay. If they did, they would. And why would I say that? A single mother who has 3 kids goes out to work and does everything, and then comes home and saves that money in order to take the kids to Disneyland. She is exchanging her time, her efforts, her being, getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, driving 3 hours, whatever, to exchange that for the happiness of the kids.
Yep.
You have a job, you go to work, and you make a decision at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Do I stay and do an additional work and get myself positioned for a promotion, or do I go home and spend the time and go to the kids' soccer game? You make that choice. We all do.
Yeah.
Those are entrepreneurial choices. That is, we are exchanging what we have with something that we think it's better, knowing that there is a risk. Knowing that there is a risk of you not getting that promotion, or there is a risk of you not, right? We make decisions all the time.
All the time.
All the time we do that. The thing is that I don't think that they see that what the exchange is, what they have versus what they're exchanging, is better. And they don't realize the risk of not exchanging.
That's fair.
Okay. So they think the risk is being imposed on me. These people out there, these
someone out there is doing this.
Somebody out there is doing it to me. And I don't like it because you're doing it to me. I'm not doing it. So I'm not on the train. I'm not on board. I'm not in the car. I'm not driving with you. You're just doing this to me. And that doesn't feel right. And I can appreciate that. But it's not fear. It's a sense of justice, maybe. It's a sense of not understanding. It's because I don't understand, because I'm not on board. And this is where I blame the media. And everybody is trying to make this thing a fearful thing. Oh, the AI is coming. It's horrible. You're going to lose your job. We're just making people afraid for no reason at all.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, so much of what's out there right now is not only making people afraid, but it's also making them feel like this isn't something you have a choice or an opportunity in. Going back to our analogy, you're not even the one choosing to ride the bike.
No, you have no choice.
Forcing you. You have no choice. You have no choice, but this is the vehicle you have to ride. You have no choice but to ride it. And if you don't, then this will happen to you. And I think in many ways, that's the mindset shift of recognizing you do have a choice in a lot of these things, so much more than I think a lot of people recognize, which can be fearful because all of a sudden now the responsibility, it's a heck of a lot easier to sit back and point the finger and go, my life sucks and it's their fault. And you're just pointing kind of in the wind instead of going,
But Chris,
I'm not happy.
that's the nature of human beings and the victimhood and all that. It's taking responsibility for a choice. It's hard.
It's
Making
very
a
hard.
choice and taking responsibility, it's a lot easier for us to say so and so did it to me. I lost because of this. I didn't do it because of this. I didn't buy this home because the interest rates went up. Those damn Fed people. Well, I didn't, right. I didn't go to this school, or I didn't do this, or I did because I lived here, or my parents were there. And it's always, and some of it is true. Some of our
Sure.
choices are limited by environment. It is true.
Yeah.
I am 5'3". I would love to be LeBron James and get $150 million, but I'm not.
Right.
I can never play in the NBA. It's just a fact of life. Now, I could be upset, or I could sit and watch LeBron all the time and imagine things and not get to my work and do anything. I'm creating a hero. Or I could say, hey, I could become a basketball team owner. How's
Yeah,
that?
there you go. Yeah, it was yeah, right. Forget being on the court,
Forget
just
being on
own
the
the
court,
court.
just own the court. It's the shift of how you see things. It's the shifting of our frame of reference from the place where we are a victim to a place where we begin to have choices. We are the ones who have the choices. See, this is the thing. Either we wait for the world to create a change, and this is one thing. I think we talked about this the first time we talked. This idea of change management.
Yeah.
Change management by itself, the way it's phrased, the way we approach it, the way we do it in companies, is that it's a horrible thing that has happened to me. Now I need to manage
Yes.
it.
Yes.
Okay. I need to manage this because this is so horrible. Let's manage it. Let's have lunches and let's have this and let's get it. No, change is not a bad thing that I have to manage. I have to embrace it. I have to jump
Yeah.
into it. Or I have to create it, better yet. It's a good thing. It's my best friend. Why don't I hug my best friend as opposed to run away from it
Yeah.
or try to manage their behavior?
And what's interesting about this shift, and going back to just some of the key components that we've talked about that's so important that I think can help people with this, because it can be very difficult. And I think some people, it just comes very naturally and they just kind of naturally go this route. I think other people, it can be much more overwhelming or a difficult path. But some of the things that you've hit on that I think are so important to this. I mean, first of all, one of them is going back to your analogy of like, I want to be LeBron James. Let's say you wanted to be LeBron James. I don't think a lot of times we've taken the time into thinking about why. And so as a result, we don't really know what kind of freedom we have in the options, because it's one of those things where you go, well, I want to be LeBron James. Well, why do you want to be LeBron James? Well, because I love basketball. Okay, but if you love basketball, there are a lot more creative options for how you can love and participate in basketball than being LeBron James. And so something that can look like, well, I want this, and the only path I see is to become an NBA superstar. And you're like, well, I hate to break it to you, but that's not a path that's going to work for you. And you can feel like, well, the world is against me and I'm not able to do this and all these things. But when you get to the core of, I just love basketball, suddenly to your point, well, maybe you can work for the team. Maybe you can, do this. Maybe you can be a coach. Maybe you can buy the team. All of a sudden the opportunities start to open up. And I think about that in my own life in times where I've hit a wall and gone, I can't get past this. And I've had to say, but what really underneath this am I actually striving for? Because once you do that, all of a sudden the possibilities open up massively.
Absolutely. That is what I call shifting your frame of reference.
Yeah.
That is shifting your frame of reference. When you shift your frame of reference, then you begin to see things differently. You begin to see things in, if you compared, I don't know, if you compare two cities, compare, I don't know, Kansas City and Malibu, okay? And you see, one would say, Malibu is by by a beach. It's wealthy people. The homes are expensive. The weather is this. Oh, Kansas City has a great team, and right. But if I don't say, hey, now compare Malibu to Santa Monica, now I see, they both have beaches. So maybe the school system is different. So you begin by comparing, by looking at things differently and changing your frame of reference. You would then begin to see a lot more,
Yeah.
and your
Yeah.
choices are expanded significantly.
Massively. I mean, your choices open up massively when you shift your frame of reference. I think of a time I was working with somebody, and remember we were coaching through this, and this individual had reached out to me initially to talk about ways that they could expand their portfolio because he was looking to make some additional revenue type of a thing. So I dug into it with him, and we started digging into it. And I said, why do you want to make more? What do you really want? And he wanted to make $1 million. It was something like that. And I dug into it. I'm like, why? Well, I want to do this and I want to do that. Why do you want to do those things? And as we got to the bottom of it, the whole thing driving this individual was to spend more time with his family. And so once we actually dug into that, I'm like, so based on this whole plan you have, it's going to be 20 years before you get to that point. And that's 20 years lost. If really what your goal isn't the opportunity today, couldn't you stop doing what you're doing right now and be? And it was one of those light bulb moments where once we shifted that frame of reference, it completely opened up a completely different landscape.
Absolutely.
And what seemed like a barrier of, I can't see a path to get here, and I've tried all these different things. When all of a sudden we shifted the frame of reference, they went, oh, the answer's right in front of me. And you're like, yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So we talked about the fear thing, and we talked about the embracing the change. There's one other thing that I think is maybe important to explore, and that's the notion of nervousness.
Okay.
When we see something, if you drive every day, you're not nervous driving.
Right.
When you drive at 100 miles an hour, start being nervous. When it's hailing outside, or snow, or icy, or black ice, or whatever you are, you're nervous. When you're nervous, it means that you're pushing the limits of your ability, or what you think you could do. You're pushing past the sameness and your comfort zone. But that's exactly where you want to be.
That's exactly where you want to be.
That's exactly where you want to be. Because that's where you're pushing the limits of who you are. That's where you open the other doors. That's when you do other things. If you talk to the majority of really big name artists and the Beyoncés of the world, they say we're nervous every time I get on the stage because I want to do better than the time that I did last time.
Yeah.
So the reason we're nervous is because we're getting to the boundaries of our limits mentally, and that's where we get. So we have to learn the art of being nervous.
Yeah.
Being nervous is good. It's very different than being afraid, and it's not.
I agree.
Excited.
Yeah. And I think it's a good point on that, in that there is this, and everybody's threshold for where that nervousness sits looks a little bit different.
Absolutely.
And I think you're spot on with that. It's like yours might look different than mine, and mine might look different than yours. And that's okay. But to your point, how do you push yourself into that zone of, I'm just stepping outside my comfort zone, not so much that I'm fearful, I'm afraid.
That's right.
But I'm also outside this zone of, yeah, I could do this. And I think we're in a culture and a society right now that we try and eliminate all of this stuff. We're like, I don't ever want to be nervous. I don't ever want to feel, I don't ever want to do this. I just want to be kind of numb or in a comfort zone. And that's actually the worst place that you can be in, because to your point, if you're not in that zone where you're just kind of on the edge of, I'm uncomfortable, you're actually not growing.
So here's something I tell people. They say, you talked about the how to, and a lot of people say, well, I'm not an entrepreneur. Well, I don't know how to do this. I say, you are, and I'm going to give you a way to do it. I'm going to give you an exercise. Get out of your home, and whatever route you took to go to work, take the other route. Make a choice.
Yeah.
When you get there, if you have tea, have coffee. Make a choice. You see, you have the choice.
Yeah.
And if it's if you're 10 minutes late getting there, see if you could be half an hour late. See what happens. See what happens. No.
Yeah. No, because it exposes you to the reality that sometimes the fears that hold us back aren't actually fears. They're not there.
They're these fictitious imaginary lines that we draw.
They're the artificial box we talked about before that you've constructed around yourself where you go, I can't step outside that box.
Yeah.
And then you push on the walls and you realize, oh, there's nothing there.
I mean, I'm not saying go jump off of an 18th story building to see if, that's stupid. That's not,
that's foolish. Right.
That's foolish. But the thing is, we all have the capability to slowly. I mean, if you say how, change the mind shift. Look at who you are. Look at change as a friend, not as a foe. Believe that you have every capability. This imaginary thing that the box isn't really there, and then you have to slowly push the limits.
Yeah, I think,
and you have a choice at the end. You have a choice. Right. It's okay to be doing exactly what you're doing within the comfort zone, but don't be afraid and don't be upset because you're only upsetting yourself.
Yes, because I think to your point, that's just it. And I think, kind of as a conclusion to this, I love that we concluded on this idea of experimentation, because it does, start to break down these false walls that we put around ourselves. It starts to make us more comfortable with these boundary lines that we've artificially drawn for ourselves. Oh, I can't ever do that. And it's like, well, how do you know? Did you ever try? But I think that mindset or that shift towards behavioral experimentation also reveals in you that you actually have more choices in this. Because again, if you experiment and let's say you get the coffee instead of the tea and you go, I hate coffee. Great. At least now you hate coffee.
That's okay.
Instead of going, it's okay. You go back to tea. And I think that experimentation can help you see you actually have a lot more choices in these things. But what I found in my years on the planet is there have been plenty of those experiments I've done that I've learned from. And I went, that was a colossal failure. And you assess the risk. I didn't, jump off an 18-story building, but it was one of those like, well, I tried it. That bombed. That didn't go that well. And I don't think I would ever pursue that again, but I learned something from it. And then there's been other times where I've pushed myself into that zone of discomfort and I've gone, oh, wait, this was all that was here. Well, okay. I guess I can kind of push a little bit further.
Yeah.
And pretty soon you find yourself somewhere you never imagined you'd ever be.
But you have to be aware of it. The point is that I am intentionally pushing this thing. That's how you learn the art of being nervous. And I'm aware of it. I know. So let me enjoy my pushing. let me enjoy the learning. Let me enjoy this, whatever it is that I'm doing. Let me enjoy it. Let me enjoy my choice.
Yeah.
And then that's not a bad thing that's happening to you. It's not happening to you.
No. Well, and I think to your point though, this is why now I think this is something I see in a lot of people, and even in myself, I used to have a battle. It was something I'll always do it in the future. I'll do it later. Instead of going, no, I'm going to do it right now because right now I have the opportunity to make that choice. What happens in the future is you run the risk of that choice being made for you instead of saying, well, why not? I've got the flexibility to experiment, to try with these things now. I may not have that same choice 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now?
I read somewhere, I don't know, it may have been I read somewhere or this was in a movie, some one-liners in movies
Yeah.
are pretty damn good. I didn't make it up, but I like it a lot. If I'm not present where I am nowhere.
Yeah. I like that.
If I'm not present where I'm nowhere.
I think that's a fantastic quote to close on, because I think that, if anything, everybody right now there has an opportunity to look, where are you right now, and what can you do about what's ahead of you. And I again, growing up in a funeral home, I was around this a lot, and so I'm very much aware of the fact that it's like, man, enjoy the moment that you're in while having a vision towards where you're going, but live where you are right now, because you don't know if you're going to make it to tomorrow. And so I think that's
And
a
but
great way.
without today, there wouldn't be a tomorrow. Without the choice
That's
that
right.
you make at this very minute, at this very every minute, at every instance, the choice that you make is what the tomorrow will influence by. You won't
Yeah.
have the tomorrow unless you make the choices that you make today.
Right.
So we
And you
focus on
have the
tomorrow
choices.
and not the decisions that we make to get to tomorrow.
Yeah. I love that. I love that, Sid. And I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, as I think everyone who's watched and listened already and who will continue watching and listening. And while it wasn't a here's the 5 steps everybody can take to reinvent ourselves and navigate, I think there was a lot of timeless wisdom in what we talked about that actually does highlight some of the things that everybody can take and steps everybody can take today to say, hey, you know what? How can I be more present right now with a path forward? And what are the choices that I can make to make for a better future? So thank you so much for joining me.
It
I've
was a
really
pleasure
enjoyed
to
this,
be
Sid.
with you. Pleasure to be with
All
you.
right.
Enjoyed the conversation.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks everybody who watched and listened. Thanks for all the engagement. It was fun watching the comments flying through. And I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. And we will see you on the other side.